Welcome back, everybody. We're back here with the Blues Rants podcast. I am your host, Philip Miller, streaming to you live from Twitter and from YouTube. Let's just jump into all the topics that we've got today. Got a bit of a long show for you. We've got a very disappointing Canadian road trip from the St. Louis Blues, capping off with a 5-2 loss in Winnipeg. We've got tonight's game against Carolina, which should be a fun one with some more pomp and circumstance than usual. We've got to talk about that Battle of Alberta, the Battle of Alberta 3.0. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? Goalie fights and all, and also a little thing happened called the Super Bowl. So we'll talk about that as well, I'm sure. But we will open up today's episode with 5-2 loss against Winnipeg. I was trying to determine what emotion I should come in to this episode with, because I was actually at the Winnipeg Jets game, and I even talked to a couple of fans afterwards. Now, the Winnipeg Jets, St. Louis Blues, both coming off of back-to-back. Obviously, Winnipeg not without a win in their last 5 games. That was their longest win drought of this season. They snapped it with a convincing 5-2 win over the Blues. Although I say convincing, it wasn't really, because there were 2 empty net goals, so it was really like a 3-2 win. And I wanted to come in just all wheels off, all hell blazing. I was frustrated by the loss at the game, although, I try to be upbeat and fair towards other fans that are chirping me back and forth in the stands. And I had some time to sleep on it, and I tried to think of possibly a more reasonable approach. This one really has been bugging me. Of the 4 games that we had a loss against Vancouver in regulation. We had a shootout win in Calgary. We had a regulation loss in Edmonton. And then we had a regulation loss against Winnipeg. Winnipeg being the largest margin of 3 goals. I get that the Blues were on the second half of a back-to-back. I get that the scoring has been a little lackluster recently. I get that we started out the game with a phenomenal first period, and some of it was due in part to Connor Hellebuyck. Another part of it was due in part to the fact we couldn't figure out that they were just collapsing on the goaltender every single time, and we're keeping away all the high danger chances. But for goodness sakes, Winnipeg had 23 giveaways in the game. And yeah, I get it. Public stats are garbage. We all know that. Everyone knows that. And if you don't, spoiler alert. Public stats that the NHL put out, not always that accurate. You look at the face-off numbers that we had against Vancouver, those are definitely not accurate. Because we were garbage in the face-off dot against Vancouver, and somehow we wound up being somewhere around 48%. But 23 giveaways by the Jets, and we can't score. I can't tell you in that building how many times I'm watching them and they were dominant for the first 18 minutes. And every single time, Winnipeg's turning the puck over in their own zone, and the groans around me are getting louder, and they're getting louder. What are you doing, Niku? What are you doing, Roslovic? What are you doing, Scheifele? Come on, let's get going here. 23 giveaways. Even if that's a little off, that's 23 giveaways. And you still can't manage to cash in and score. And I looked at the tape, and I tried remembering a lot of the shots that I saw. Yeah, Connor Hellebuyck had some good saves, but a lot of them were just going right to the chest, if I recall correctly. A lot of them just went right to the chest. He swallowed up the rebound, nothing doing. This was a team that has lost 5 games in a row. They should have no confidence. They are towards the bottom of the Central Division standings. Yes, they're a division rival. Yes, the last time we've seen them, we basically kicked them out of the playoffs. Yes, they have no right side. And now Dustin Byfuglien sounds like it's done, by the way. If any of you heard that, it sounds like the Winnipeg Jets and Dustin Byfuglien are looking to terminate his contract. So Dustin Byfuglien coming back is, I don't know, apparently just out the window. And then you give up goal number 1. Yeah, okay. It somehow bounced off the referee and everybody just gets caught napping, or like we're just going to rush it out of the neutral zone. And that turns into Roslovic's first goal. The second goal, Troy Brouwer, look at the play again. Look at the entire play again from start to finish. I can't come up with a defense for Troy Brouwer in this. I know he's a fan favorite. I know he's a fourth liner at best. But watching what he was doing was just sickening. So if you didn't see it, Troy Brouwer is trying to carry it off through the neutral zone. Basically, it started with Jay Bouwmeester trying to feed Brayden Schenn on a breakaway, and number 7 for Winnipeg, I forget who it is, immediately just blocks it. Now, I will say that was a good heads-up play by number 7 to see that, because otherwise Schenn's on a clear-cut breakaway, a clean, clear-cut breakaway through the zone. And so now it comes the other way, and immediately he gives it off to Dmitry Kulikov, who is now Troy Brouwer's man. And Troy Brouwer tries to give chase with a little poke check, can't get the puck off of him, just stays on his man, and just stays there in the near corner as he's getting the puck away. And rather than just quickly finishing out his check and turning around, because now you're in the defensive zone down low, he just stays there with him. And now you're watching, he's a full stride behind the play before the second goal is eventually buried. Because number 7 gets the initial shot, gets rebounded away off of Binnington's pads, and Jack Roslovic pots it for an easy second goal. That one put it up 2-0 towards the end of the second period. And I'm thinking, okay, this is still a close one. You just got to get one, and then you'll get another, right? Blues have done it before, right? Know what else the Blues have done before? Andrew Copp, 15 seconds left in the second period. They give up that goal. Okay. The first one kind of awkwardly bounces off the ref. I give the guys a little bit of a pass for that one. Maybe the one with 15 seconds to go, Binnington could probably save. For whatever reason, I just could not see how you managed to just give up the goals like that. You play a dominant first period, and I mean dominant. Again, the 23 giveaways were also mostly because Winnipeg was just not playing well in their own end. They're not playing well in their own end, and offensive turnovers are the worst. They're far worse than defensive or neutral zone turnovers. Yet somehow somebody can't find the final finish, other than Jaden Actual Schwartz, to just put the game away for good. And we talk about the Blues' record when they're scoring first, which they are now 22-1-6. That's good for third. But you still got to put the biscuit in the basket. The Blues can't find a way to score a goal off of 23 different giveaways by the Winnipeg Jets. Jets go up 3-0 into the third period. I liked seeing Brayden Schenn's first goal since December 23rd. I wrote that down. And not for lack of trying either, because I think we've seen a lot of plays where Brayden Schenn has either hit a post or just been that close or straight up been robbed. He was all over the ice in that game against Vancouver, and he just ran into Thatcher Demko. Like, I don't fault him for that. So that had to feel good for him. But when you have a guy like Pietrangelo going -4, which, okay, differential, kind of a loser stat, whatever. But still, your lead defenseman is a -4. At some point, that can't be ignored. Just the way that 23 giveaways by the Jets can't be ignored. It drove me batty to watch chance after chance not go in. Or they just, I don't know, tried to get too pretty with the puck and it just never wound up being a high danger chance. I'll give some credit to Connor Hellebuyck, because Connor Hellebuyck has had a Vezina level season and has physically strapped this Winnipeg Jets team to his back to carry them into the playoffs, which they might still get there. They could. They're currently sitting 5th out of 7th, get 1 point, and they're ahead of the Blackhawks, and then right now they're sitting 6 points behind the Avs. That's 3 wins. That's not going on a heater. That's not going on an 11-game tear like the Blues. That's just 3 straight wins, and all of a sudden you're right there in the playoff picture again. And I'll give credit to the Blues for the way they played in the first half, because the Blues are now sitting with 70 points. They are comfortably atop the Western Conference. They have 6 points on anybody in the Central. Dallas getting the win last night. Thanks a lot, New York Rangers. They are now in second with 64. And then you have Vancouver over in the Pacific with 65. So I give Blues credit where it's due for playing the most dynamite year of hockey we have seen in franchise history. Calendar year, I should say. But I think tonight's game, you've got to get that going again. Because we've had these little skids of regulation losses. And again, I'll say they've only lost 2 in regulation now. 2 straight in regulation. They had the shootout win over Calgary, which, yes, they won by the slimmest of margins, and they hated how the game played out, so it was practically chalked up almost as a loss. But you've got to figure out what went wrong during that Canadian trip, in my mind. None of these are burn the tape games. You have got to find out what fundamentally went wrong during those games and get it going in the homestand tonight. Because we know this team on the road. We know this team was a force, an absolute wagon, especially on the road. And to drop 3 out of 4 games like that one concerns me. Now, the Blues have not played a lot of back-to-backs. But all the same, from what I saw against the game in Winnipeg in person, that definitely concerns me. And now Winnipeg's snapped their 5-game losing streak. I liked seeing the 1,000th game tribute for Alex Steen as he played game number 1,000 in his hometown of Winnipeg. Congrats to Alex Steen. I thought he actually played really well. He played with a lot of fire, a lot of edge to his game. He was wanting to get something going there bad. Same along with Tyler Bozak, Robert Thomas, who was not playing on the same line, by the way, and will not play on the same line tonight, but Ruby's shaking things up a little bit. Also heard mentioned at practice that the team played with a little bit of edge in practice yesterday. Not so much Craig Berube as much as the team, which I actually like to see. I like to see that, because we talked such a huge game about Craig Berube and how just if one period in, one period out, he can just get the boys going, get something new going. He can jumble up the lines. He can just tinker around with anything he wants mid-game, and it's working. But I also like to see some fire from the players. I like to hear that guys like, perhaps Pietrangelo or O'Reilly and Perron are getting mad. And they're not satisfied with that 1-3-0 road trip. And neither are some of the other depth guys now. Before I continue on, again, this is what enraged me the most. And I think he was actually a +0 on the ice for that game. And he didn't directly contribute, if I recall, to any of the bad goals. Justin Falk, you're literally killing me. Justin Falk, I'm sorry. I know I rag on him episode in and episode out. I know that guys like Todd Panula over at Bleeding Blue give him a lot of slack, which is probably deserved. I understand anybody outside of the St. Louis organization does not understand all the crap that we are throwing at him, me specifically. But my gosh, we're paying this man $6.5 million next year. Some of the moves that I'm seeing him make, I just can't help but scratch my head. It's just the little details of his game that have just still not worked. And I like seeing that he's on the bottom pairing tonight with Vince Dunn. I really do. And I hope he gets less minutes or something like that, but he plays every minute that he's got with full fervor. And that's how I'll transition into our next topic, playing against his former team, Carolina. If there's ever a game to show me, to give me an excuse not to yell at you next episode, it's tonight. It's tonight against your former club of 9 years. This is the first time we've seen them this season. Joel Edmondson's going to be in the building. He's going to get his ring before the game starts, which, by the way, puck drop at 7 p.m. tonight in Enterprise Center. But Justin Falk just has yet to impress me. And he's got decent points. I mean, I think relative to the way he has played in the past, he's got a decent point clip. I want to say he's got 15, 16 assists. Not a lot of goals. But for the amount that we've hyped him up as an elite tier defenseman, the amount that we've hyped him up as insurance for Alex Pietrangelo, for the amount that we've talked to him about being this power play scoring guru, he has no power play goals. And he makes simple, silly little mistakes like turnovers at the blue line. I saw somebody go into an all-out rant against him about how just game after game after game since Colorado, it's just unraveled. Because what it starts for me is that giveaway with him on literally the fastest player in the NHL in Nathan McKinnon. And it just keeps sliding down from there. And then he finds himself chasing the play in that Edmonton game. There was just too many simple mistakes where I was just watching him, and perhaps I just watch him too much. Maybe I just watch him too much without the puck, and I need to watch other people without the puck. But Justin Falk, man, he's given me gray hairs. I know he has not lived up to par so far this season. I hope at some point he can try and get something together. Maybe it's against Carolina tonight. I would like it to be against Carolina tonight. I don't know. And again, this is going to be a big tee-up game for the start of this homestand. Because you've got Carolina tonight, and Carolina's in that playoff hunt. They're not in a wild card spot currently. They've dropped off a little bit since starting about, around Christmas time, around the holidays. But they're still in that playoff race. They're still fighting there with Columbus and Philadelphia. Columbus coming out of nowhere, literally. Then you're going against Winnipeg. And y'all better be mad about that one. They all better be hosting the Jets with a little fire after that last game. Then you're hosting the Dallas Stars. I think nothing more needs to be said about that. I just said the Stars are in second place. They're going to be hungry after round 2 of last year, specifically Game 7 double overtime. And you play Dallas, I want to say 3 times this February. Then you're on the road to Anaheim. Then you go to Vegas. Then you host the Predators, and then you go to the Predators. You got a home-and-home again with Nashville, which we had back in November and dropped both of those, one of them in overtime. if you're playing against Nashville, who is, in my mind, still falling off a cliff, I, I, I'd love to see David Poile do some sort of wild card move, but I think at this point he's out of options for that Predators team. They're currently sitting in sixth, a point behind Winnipeg and Chicago. But you know, at any time, any rivalry between Nashville and St. Louis is going to be heated. I think somebody was asking me who my least favorite NHL team is. Obviously, I picked Chicago as number one, even though Chicago has not been very good. And then I actually picked Nashville second. I think maybe that's just because of the playoffs a few years back, but there's something about Nashville I still don't care for. And the division rivalry certainly helps. But you're going to have two obviously intense games against Nashville. You're going against Vegas, who is still fighting. They're still finding their game again under Pete DeBoer. They're now in third in the Pacific. You got Anaheim, which should be 2 points. Do not allow what happened back in November to happen again. That should be 2 points. And then you've got Dallas and Winnipeg and Carolina tonight. So again, this game against the Carolina Hurricanes should be a big tee-up for tonight, because there's going to be a lot of emotion. Justin Falk's playing his old team. Joel Edmondson's going to get his ring. There's going to be a whole ceremony about it. We all know that. Sebastian Aho just scored his 26th goal that leads the team. Obviously, do not let Andrei Svechnikov anywhere near the back of the cage tonight, as we all know how that's gone down twice, 3 times. No, he scored twice, and then somebody in Nashville scored another one. They're 13th in scoring. However, their defense is just as good, if not arguably better than St. Louis's. And St. Louis, the defense has been bread and butter, and they've been struggling a little bit of late. But the Carolina Hurricanes, also with Dougie Hamilton, who has been out with a broken leg since, how long has he been out for? A little over a month, a little under a month. I think he was mid-January. I think he was injured. So a little under a month. So you're not going to have Dougie Hamilton, who is an elite defenseman. But even without him, you've still got guys, of course, like Eddy, or you've got Jake Gardiner now over there. You've got Jacob Slavin. You've got Van Riemsdyk. That is a stacked blue line. And for a team like Carolina, they're second in the league when scoring first. They're 22-3-1 when scoring first. The Blues are right behind them at 22-1-6. So huge key to the game tonight is going to be to who gets on the board first. And I think another key to the game is going to be whose defense is going to outplay the other one, in my honest opinion. Because their high danger percentages right now at 56.7, that's very, very good. High danger goals for is 28, and the league average is 24. This is all per Hockey Reference. So the Blues have got a real challenge tonight on the blue line ahead of them. And who better to showcase who's winning this trade right now than Justin Falk and Joel Edmondson. Also, stop them in that first period, because the Carolina Hurricanes are a 106 positive shot on goal differential in the first period. Plus 106. That's a little nutty. So, obviously, big key is do the same thing that you did in Winnipeg. Show up to the game on time, which they did. But now you've got one of the best blue lines in the NHL. You don't have Winnipeg's half a line. So figure out a way to get on the board first. Show up to the game on time. You know they're going to put a lot of shots on net. Start blocking them. I think that's going to be my big keys to the game tonight. And again, guys like Jake Allen or Jordan Binnington, I don't think they were great, but I think it's got to start with having some help in front of them, and I think it's got to also start helping with scoring effects. Because when you go down 3-0 at the end of the second period, hard to say that they're going to take the loss on that one, even though we've seen the Blues do it before. But you can't be expecting that every single game, if that makes any sense. Got about 4 minutes to the top of the hour. And speaking of scoring drought, obviously the rumor mills have only increased on the Blues trying to pursue a top 6 guy. Really sounds like the sweepstakes right now for Chris Kreider is on. Either him or Tyler Toffoli. Excuse me. That seems to be about the only 2 guys that the Blues are really interested in, or at least guys that move the needle, in my opinion. And join the club when it comes to the Chris Kreider race, because according to Pierre LeBrun, about 8 other teams are interested. Pierre LeBrun also, this shows you, if you never understood, so Pierre LeBrun puts out an article in The Athletic about trade deadline moves that would make a lot of sense, Chris Kreider being at the top. And the trade that he proposed for Chris Kreider to the Blues would be to trade Zach Sanford and a first-round pick, with New York retaining 50% of Chris Kreider's salary, which is $2.3125, essentially. What that basically tells me is that this is going to be a really boring trade deadline. I mean, if we're writing articles about what could happen at this point with the trade deadline coming up in just over 3 weeks, I wouldn't expect too many fireworks. And I'm still not entirely convinced for either direction whether the Blues just want to stand pat. I've heard a lot of people that say they just want to stand pat, because why not? Why not screw around with the roster that's still got you comfortably in first? But I also was listening to the last 31 Thoughts podcast, which I'm going to play some audio for you right now. And I don't know. Kind of like the Adrian Wojnarowski of hockey, Elliot Friedman saying maybe they want to make a move. I don't know. This is for you to decide. But here's Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman on the 31 Thoughts podcast from January 3rd.
Tell you, I know they lost in Vancouver and they won the other night in Calgary in a shootout. That St. Louis team is really good.
Let's get there.
And they think they have a shot to win it again.
I was going to say, and could they be getting even better now with the news that Vladimir Tarasenko may be out a little bit longer, freeing up some room for Doug Armstrong to do something?
So I've told this story before, but when Alex Steen was injured several years ago, I think it was the year after Patrick Kane, and I would have done exactly what the Blackhawks did. I would have totally hit him on LTIR, got out in my guy and say, magic. Game one of the playoffs. Patrick Kane is healthy.
Pulling doves out of his sleeves.
I totally would have done the same thing if it was me.
And I am king, curtain.
So the next year that happened with Steen and, Doug Armstrong, I asked him, would you do that? And he said, no. I believe if a guy is ready to play, you put him in. Tarasenko has begun to skate. I don't think he's anywhere close. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is one of the biggest decisions remaining on this NHL season. Do the St. Louis Blues hold Tarasenko out for the rest of the regular season? Because I'll say this. I believe the Blues will try to add, but I don't think they will want to subtract. They don't want to take anybody off their active roster who's a significant part of what they want to do.
So I'll actually keep playing that because there's some more good audio there. But I wanted to quickly pause it there because he's got a good point. He's sounding more and more dismal on Tarasenko. Sounds like playoffs optimistically, and nothing before that. No hockey in March or April probably for Vladdy. And then he goes on to say the comment that, yes, they are possibly interested in pursuing a top 6, but they don't want to. They don't want to be returning that much, which I think is where the problem lies. Because now Chris Kreider's value's gone up so high, where if you've got a guy like LeBrun suggesting your next year's first round pick, and Zach Sanford, I don't know how you want to do that, man. It sounds to me like this year's draft class is going to be pretty loaded, and depending on where of course the Blues finish in the standings, where they end up finishing in the playoffs, because playoffs seem all but a certainty so far for St. Louis. Once again, I keep seeing. I've never seen any sort of panic index for Doug Armstrong. What I mean by that is I've never seen any knee-jerk reactions from him. I mean, if he had the patience to not just hit the button to launch the atom bomb on last year's roster up until January 3rd, essentially, then I don't think I see Armstrong doing anything here. Now, of course, I see the last 4 games against all these Canadian teams, which, by the way, they were outscored in 16-10 in total. Maybe that's going to force his hand. I mean, for me personally, like, again, I say that I have to see a trade that ends up moving the needle for St. Louis. And at this point, I really think Kreider's the only option that does that. Tyler Toffoli, maybe. But for guys like, I don't know, Ricard Raquel or Nick Ritchie or Alex Galchenyuk, who I've talked about in previous episodes, I don't see that anymore. Not now. And again, it's going to be that tricky salary cap issue. But again, going on with the salary cap, I will continue on here in this episode of 31 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman and Jack Merrick.
They want to add to their team, not make it go sideways.
Where?
Well, I think Kreider is an obvious one. But I will tell you...
No, I'm saying like forwards or...
Forwards. I think it's forwards. Top 6 forward. At the All-Star weekend, I had a couple guys tell me, players, they don't think Kreider wants to be traded. Now, they think he prefers to stay as a Ranger. Now, that may be out of his hands if the Rangers get a good offer. But I do think the Rangers are going to pitch. And I think, as I wrote, if they come in 5 years somewhere just below 7, between 6.5 and 7, they wonder what Kreider is going to want to do. They think he really likes being a Ranger. It's out of his hands, right? If the Rangers get a great offer, they take it, and maybe they try to bring him back in the summer. But I think the Blues are going to want to try to do something, and I think other teams are wondering, like, as one GM said to me, if I was Doug Armstrong, I wouldn't have the same scruples I had back in 2016. I mean, how often do you have a chance to win twice, never mind once?
So that's another interesting thought, especially on the fact that he thinks that Kreider wants to stay a Ranger, which is very interesting to me. Kreider's obviously been with the organization a long time. But if he is not wanting to play, if he's wanting to re-sign with New York, that's probably the best news for the Rangers organization, because now you've basically got a guy not wanting to necessarily go to a team that has a chance of repeating. I mean, this has been the conversation for a while. St. Louis is up there on chances for competing for the Cup alongside of your Washingtons, your Bostons, you name it. But to me now, that just means Chris Kreider's price has gone up, and it just keeps rising. I mean, he was nominated to this year's All-Star game. He's been performing incredibly well ever since a bit of a lackluster October and November. And now we're at the point where New York might think of re-signing him. Like, we have 8 different teams interested in New York Ranger Chris Kreider. Oh, and by the way, also the New York Rangers. So I think that makes it really tough on Armstrong to make a trade that makes sense, where we're not losing an arm and a leg for him. It's an interesting thought, and maybe we just take him on as a rental and then he goes and re-signs with New York. That could be another possible option. And I don't want to go against Elliot Friedman. Who would? I don't want to go against Elliot Friedman and when he thinks that the Blues are really wanting to add a guy like Kreider to the top 6. But I just think the market just continues to get hotter for him. And again, 8 teams, winner goes to the highest bidder. Kreider goes to the highest bidder. So at what point does Armstrong and the Blues just finally say, nope, enjoy him. We'll try something else, or we'll try working with what we've got. Continuing on, I want to keep hearing from this 31 Thoughts because he keeps talking about the Blues.
Anything more with Alex Pietrangelo? He passes Brian Sutter for 3rd all-time in assists by a St. Louis Blue. Anything more there? I mean, he's just chasing Hull and Federico at this point for assists. Does he get a shot to pass them?
First of all, I don't get the sense there's any talks going on. But the thing I think about Pietrangelo is I think he's mature. Like, I think he's looking at this right now. Like, the way he's playing, you don't get the sense he's screwed up by what's happening. He's just like, focused. This is what I'm worried about. At the end of the day, I have to feel that somehow it's going to work out. But it's going to work out at 8 times 8.5 for St. Louis. I could see maybe him wanting more. I could see his agents wanting more. He could definitely probably get more, an AAV at least. But I think what the Blues are gambling on is, does he want to really leave St. Louis?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that guy's a Blue.
So we had Darren Pang on Hockey Central on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this. And Darren Pang is talking, and I believe the exact quote was something along the lines of,
if he ends up with the St. Louis Blues for the rest of his career, he gets a statue in front, and he'll go down as the highest-scoring defenseman of all time. And I think, his legacy will be right there.
Like, that could be the legacy this guy carves out for himself in St. Louis.
What's
that worth to you?
Here's... I love
like when you look back,
like
when you look back at what is that worth to you to have that outside an arena forever?
For me, I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
When I retire, whenever that is, maybe next week if you have your way.
What's this retirement you speak?
Yeah, I'm going to be a ghost.
Oh no, I'm going to be a rumor. See you later. But there is a body of work and a legacy that you want to leave behind.
I personally don't. I don't believe in legacies.
Hang on a second, but athletes do.
Yeah.
But athletes do. You may not personally, but you know what drives these guys, and you know what they're all about, and you know where they want to be in the pecking order of this game they've grown up adoring.
See, I don't know Pietrangelo as much as other people do. He doesn't strike me as a guy that would really care if there was a statue. I mean, I might be totally wrong, but here's the thing. This is the way I look at it, Jeff.
All right.
If the St. Louis Blues believe that Alex Pietrangelo deserves a statue, that shouldn't change if he leaves them in free agency. That's my opinion. If his body of work deserves a statue because he captained the first St. Louis team to win a Stanley Cup ever, if he chooses to go somewhere else this summer, that shouldn't change. Yes, there might be hard feelings. Yes, he may go play somewhere else. But you know what? Like, I'm a guy who believes the Toronto Raptors should retire Kawhi Leonard's number. Kyle Lowry first, Kawhi Leonard second. I don't care that Kawhi Leonard played only 1 year in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
To me, if you lead something special, that's all that matters. And if it's about the statue, Pietrangelo should be getting it already.
So that's a really interesting comment. And I agree with him as well, by the way. I think if you're the first captain of this franchise to hoist the frickin' cup, how many people bought Alex Pietrangelo away jerseys, do you think? Because that's the first Blues jersey to touch the cup. How many Alex Pietrangelo away jerseys with a Stanley Cup final patch have been bought? Seriously, how many do you think? I agree also in the sense that I don't think Pietrangelo is a legacy type of guy. And I agree that that's not on his mind during this season. Which he's right on all accounts by that. You know, Pietrangelo, I can confirm that, by the way, because they talked about that in the STL Post-Dispatch, that Armstrong and Pietrangelo got together in September. They shot him a number, which is probably that 8.3, 8.4. They were well off, as we've seen Roman Josi sign for 9, and that's been the situation for the last 3-4 months. So for a guy like Pietrangelo, first of all, yes, I think he already gets his statue. Second of all, it's an interesting gamble, in my opinion, to just let this run until after the season. Because Pietrangelo, as well as everybody in that locker room, knows right now we're chasing number 2. We want to go back to back. And for Alex Pietrangelo, now there's that asterisk because he's going to chase for that second one and then let the chips fall where they may. But that's an interesting gamble to me, the fact that he's seen as a Blue and nothing else, which is true because this is, I believe, his 13th season with the St. Louis Blues. He's been a St. Louis Blue since he was literally drafted at 18. But on the other hand, this is not, this is not like a Trevor Lewis with LA. This is not some lower end like depth guy. Like this is not an Alex Steen situation. If Alex Steen were to have his contract or Jay Bouwmeester, like even if Jay Bouwmeester had spent all of his time with St. Louis and not split between Florida, Calgary, and St. Louis, I still think the situation is different because Jay Bouwmeester is 36. 35. 36. I'm going with 36. Alex Pietrangelo is still 30. Alex Pietrangelo is still an elite defenseman. Alex Pietrangelo is still getting sought after by a lot of teams. Toronto's salivating at the mouth, thinking at the fact that they could bring another Torontonian back. For the Blues, I think it's a really interesting gamble for a guy that's only entering age 30, for a guy who, in my honest opinion, trying to remove as much bias as I can, for a guy that's got a higher ceiling than Roman Josi over in Nashville. And Elliot Friedman throws out the 8x85 number. I'm questioning if that's really the number that gets it done. But I don't think we're hearing anything about it until after this season. I think it's just going to have to stay that way, and the Blues are going to roll the dice. The Blues are going to roll the dice if Pietrangelo really wants to take a pay cut that bad, or if he wants to be an elite Norris-level defenseman somewhere else. I mean, he's reversing the clock. This is probably one of the best seasons we've seen him play. Now, that might also be a similar captain situation now that I think about it with David Backes. Because we didn't hear jack about David Backes until his last season, and I think his last season he put up 10, 15 goals. It's an interesting scenario. It's not one that I'm sure any Blues fans like. It's not a situation that I'm sure Alex Pietrangelo or his family likes. Because he's got a wife and he's got triplets now, doesn't he? He's got triplets that are 2 or 3 or something. But again, I don't think we're hearing anything about it until after this season. And that's also why, even if we do go for a guy like Chris Kreider, he's not sticking around because the Blues just can't keep him. I think of all the RFAs, I think Jay Bouwmeester is going to have to walk. You're going to have to trade off guys like a Zach Sanford or even a Sammy Blais or as I look at some of the other UFAs here on my screen. Like Troy Brouwer. Troy Brouwer's not coming back. I don't see you being able to re-sign Jay Bouwmeester when he's at 3.25 and we're still trying to talk about re-signing Alex. But again, it's going to be a conversation for another day, and that day comes some point after the season. If I had to put money down, I think that's how I would put it. Next topic at hand, as Blues Puck Drop comes up in just about 45 minutes. The Battle of Alberta 3.0. What was that? Absolutely incredible. If you guys didn't watch this game, for shame. And if you guys didn't watch it, here's just some audio to see what you missed.
Back inside, Cam Talbot reaches back. And that is whistled down, and nobody is happy now. And look out.
And now maybe a melee.
Nerede pitcher Cam Talbot को सामने गया ब्लॉक कर देना आकर्षण मारा सारे जी लड़पे
Now we've got a wild scrum with fights breaking out all over the place. And Smith is coming up the center ice as this thing comes unglued.
Ethan Bear and Matthew Tkachuk have dropped the gloves.
Bear belts him with the right hand. Tkachuk counters with a straight right. Right hook, Ethan Bear. And now we're going to have a goalie fight.
Look at this, they're going to go.
Mike Smith are going to go as center ice.
Down with that Smith. What a long time hockey.
Talbot Shore with the right hand. Smith, 3 clubbing right hands. Right hand Talbot. Big right-handed shot from Mike Smith. This is the Battle of Alberta we've been waiting for 3 decades.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Goalie fights. You've got Smith and Talbot. Talbot getting demolished. You've got Cassian involved. You've got Lucic not involved for whatever reason. You've got Ethan Bear fighting Matthew Tkachuk, who is probably the most electric player to be watching right now. Not in terms of scoring, but just in terms of instigating. It was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I went to that Winnipeg Jets game. Both the games were on Saturday night. I went to the Winnipeg Jets game. Obviously was disappointed by the score. Went to go drink out my sorrows. And, of course, I'm in Canada, so every TV's got this game on right now. I had people of all ages, of all genders, stop what they were doing and turn to the TV. When you've got, I mean, Ken Dryden style, Mike Smith just coming up to the red line, just begging for the challenge, like hands underneath his chin, just waiting. And Cam Talbot throws down the gloves, pretty much encouraged by Darnell Nurse. Basically, Darnell Nurse was like, hey, you should go fight him. Go fight him. And, yeah, Cam Talbot got destroyed. Watch it on Sportsnet or something, because he got demolished in that fight. But for all intents and purposes, another phenomenal game. Really bad result, basically, from the start for Calgary. I mean, Edmonton went up 2-0, I think, in like the first 3 minutes of the game. And it was just all downhill from there. 8-3 blowout, all said and done for Edmonton. Literally only 4 players went without a point on their roster. But this was still absolute bananas game and so much fun. I mean, what do we have to do now to get these teams in the playoffs together? How much absolute freaking fun would that be, right? The Battle of Alberta is certainly on. It has taken Canadian media by storm. I hope there's more of it in the future, because the fact that we have not seen, like he said, for 3 decades, these two teams hashing it out, it is electric. I don't care if you are a casual hockey fan, or if you're a diehard Blues fan, or if you're a diehard Edmonton or Calgary fan. That was a lot of fun to watch. So glad I got to see that live on TV in Canada. How much fun was that? we will wrap up the show with a football game. Super Bowl 53, 54. I know how to count. Super Bowl 54 was on this Sunday. Turned out to be a pretty exciting one. The 10th most watched Super Bowl in history, with the Kansas City Chiefs winning after 50 years of not being in the Super Bowl. Does that sound familiar? Does a Missouri team not being in the Super Bowl, not being in the championship after 50 years sound familiar? I can't. Okay. Say what you want about the guy. I don't like to get political on this show. Say what you want about the guy, but if you're going to put out a tweet, like the instant after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, if it's the only thing that all American media in sports has been talking about for, I don't know, the last 3 weeks. And if you're going to meet the team that wins, I don't know, Trump, maybe you ought to know that Kansas City is actually in Missouri and not Kansas, and I don't think there's any sports organizations in Kansas. I get it. Yes, okay, whatever. It's confusing. It's the whole Arkansas, not Arkansas, as that one meme quotes. But my goodness, I couldn't help but getting a laugh out of that. Oh, dude, and we all know that Trump's not one to pull back from any of the tweets that he's made in his 4 years as presidency. That one, he hit the ejector seat pretty hard. Okay, yeah, we gotta pull back on this one. We gotta fix this. So congratulations to the Kansas City, Missouri Chiefs for winning the Super Bowl after not being there for 50 years. Pat Mahomes named the MVP of the Super Bowl. I was not a fan of that decision, because arguably Pat Mahomes did not play well until the last, 9-10 minutes of the game. They were down by 10 points going into the fourth quarter. Obviously, Mahomes and the rest of the Chiefs just exploded in the fourth quarter to end up winning 31-20, being the final. You had all sorts of storylines. Obviously, Mahomes being one of the main ones. You had Richard Sherman, who, oh man, he might have been the worst player on the field from that fourth quarter on. He was getting exposed left and right. They were getting him on every single carry, every single pass, it seemed. There was the story of Richard Kittle. Is that his first name, Richard? I know his last name's Kittle. But all the same, there was a few, I shouldn't say a lot, I should say a few fans trying to blame the referees. I thought the game was officiated fine. I thought the two big ones that they missed was the offensive pass interference on Kittle, which they didn't miss. They got right. I'm going to say this right now. They got that call right. You look at the replay, and you look and you clearly see that he's creating separation by pushing him to the side. That's offensive pass interference. That's the rule. So I'm totally in agreement with that one. The helmet-to-helmet contact on Jimmy Garoppolo, that one was definitely missed in my mind, and that was an important call. I believe that ended up immediately resulting in a touchdown afterwards for Kansas City. But other than that, I thought the officiating was fine. And of course, it goes without saying also that Vinovich was the head referee, same referee for that NFC game with the New Orleans Saints, where he brutally missed that call. So for whatever that was worth. The halftime show with J-Lo and Shakira probably got talked about more than the game itself. First of all, if you think it's too raunchy for your kids, change the channel. Just change the channel. It's that simple. It's not even like a little dial on your TV anymore. Now you got a fancy remote for that. Yes, they were scantily clad. Yes, so has everybody in the Super Bowl halftime for the last 5-10 years. Remember when Maroon 5 singer Adam Levine, remember when he was just on shirtless and everybody was making fun of his California tattoo just written across his chest? I don't remember too many ladies complaining about the Super Bowl halftime show after seeing that one. And maybe I'm just not a huge fan of J-Lo and Shakira, which I'm not. I know, from a choreography side, they killed it. The choreography was pretty phenomenal in this halftime show. But I've just never really been interested in the halftime show, to be honest with you. And yes, there was the whole thing about, was it J-Lo that was accused of lip sync, or them both? Pretty sure both of them were, but I'm pretty positive that the Who also lip synced, and maybe even Paul McCartney from years and years ago. Those are the last two that I really remember. I remember that could be something I put out on Twitter. I remember obviously the Adam Levine one with Maroon 5. I remember Bruno Mars when Red Hot Chili Peppers was on there for all of about 30 seconds. Everybody remembers Katy Perry because of Left Shark. That was a funny one. The Black Eyed Peas, I remember I wasn't really astounded by anything there. So again, I'm probably just not a big fan of the halftime shows. But I know that J-Lo and Shakira, according to most people, they basically killed it. So congrats to them. Congrats to Demi Lovato on singing the national anthem. I thought that was really good for her. I know that Demi Lovato had kind of a rough couple of years there. So to see her come back, and I thought she sang the anthem very well, so good for her. And other than that, commercials. I actually liked a lot of the commercials this time. I think my favorite had to be the Smat Pack, the Hyundai commercial. I thought that one was great. How about that Google commercial, though? Come on, how about that Google commercial? I about had to start grabbing tissues during a football game. That was ridiculous, man. Look up the Google commercial during the Super Bowl and tell me you don't cry. Tell me you don't cry, because that one was a really emotional one. That will be probably it as far as talking about the Super Bowl. Once again, I don't think it was as much as San Fran's game to lose as it was Kansas City's game to win, perhaps. Although I say that, in all three of the playoff games for Kansas City this year were won coming back from 10 points behind or more. All three of them. I think that might be one of the first times in NFL history that's been done. And pretty cool to see that done on the 100th year. Again, Patty Mahomes was great in the last 8 minutes of the game. I don't think he was good all throughout. But of course, he came up in the clutch moments. He came up in the most clutch moments of the biggest game of the year in essentially American sports when you think about it. It's the Super Bowl. It's bigger than the NHL Stanley Cup Finals or the NBA Finals or the World Series. It's the Super Bowl. So, biggest game of literally the year. He came up huge. I think Colin Cowherd said earlier on his show today, he is one of a couple of players where you're gonna write him a blank check. Kansas City just says, okay, we got our signature there. We got our Kansas City Chiefs there. You fill out however much money you want. Because I'm still of the belief that Patrick Mahomes is going to be the next big thing. And I'd say that still for Lamar Jackson, just win a playoff game first. In all honesty, just win a playoff game first, and then you might convince me. But Patty Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, congrats to them. Two Missouri teams winning their respective championships after a 50-year drought, just a year apart from each other. I still think that's a pretty cool stat, but whatever. That's probably going to be it for today's episode. We've got Blues, we've got Carolina coming up here in about half an hour. Joel Edmondson's going to get his ring, as I mentioned. Justin Falk playing against his old club. But that's going to have to round up the episode for me. My name again has been Philip Miller. You've been listening to the Blues Rants podcast. Be sure to read all of our articles on bluesrants.com. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and click that bell. I can't believe I just did that. Am I officially a YouTuber now? I'm going to leave now. Thanks for listening to the show.